Well, I guess we're ready. Well, hey everyone. My name is Larry Schaefer. I'm owner winemaker of Terre Wines. I'm also president of the board of directors of the Rhone Rangers. I want to welcome you to our last Zoom of 2024. Uh, we're really excited to be having the wines we're having today. We're focusing in on cooler weather wines, seeing that we are sitting here in December and we're not in the southern hemisphere. It is rather chilly for most of us, some more than others. I'm sure Rachel is freezing a lot more than we are in Virginia right now. But I'm excited to kind of lead everyone through this panel of 5 wines. Our first panelist, unfortunately, is not on with us yet. So I think what we're going to do is skip over, and we're actually going to start with Doug Lewis from Lewis Wine. So on this panel, we have wineries from Texas, we have wineries from Virginia, we have wineries from different parts of California as well. Really trying to show that diversity of wines that are being produced around the country with Rhone varieties, a lot more than just one specific region or one specific state. So I've had the pleasure of meeting Doug and really fun guy, and I'm really excited to introduce him and have him talk about his wine and about himself and his winery. And Doug, you are muted. Still can't hear you.
How about
Uh-oh.
now?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Uh, Paul, how about now?
That's good.
Sorry about that. Thanks for the introduction, Larry. I'm super excited to be here. I've only been in Rhone Rangers for a year, but we've been working with Rhone varieties here in Texas for 15 years now. A little background on myself and the winery. I started making wine, my own wines, when I was working for another winery in Texas while I was still in college. And while I was working for that winery, it was kind of drinking through the fire hose in terms of learning. I didn't know a lot about different varieties and kind of was approaching a lot of it with an open mind because we had, Cab, Merlot, Tempranillo, Grenache, Sangiovese, Mourvèdre. I mean, just, varieties from all over the place. And I just kind of tasted everything we had in the cellar, and Mourvèdre really spoke to me, stood out aromatically, and I just really liked the wine. And as soon as we started to make our own wine, we jumped at the opportunity to work with Mourvèdre. It's done very well in Texas and several different regions. And one thing I really like about the variety is it seems to be very expressive of where it's grown. Even within like the hill country where I am in Central Texas is by like landmass a very large AVA. It's actually bigger than the state of Delaware. I think it's the second or third largest AVA by landmass in the country. So there's a lot of diversity from one part of the region to the next. And this Mourvèdre comes from Parr Vineyards, which is on the northwest side of the hill country in an area that we're in line with the TTB to get recognized as a new AVA. And that's going to be called the Hickory Sands District. It's called that because they're referring to hickory colored sandstone overlaying granite, which is different soils than like where my winery is in the Pedernales River Valley. So this Mourvèdre from Parr Vineyards is grown in hickory sand, which is very, very old sandstone overlaying granite. It's probably about 2,200 feet elevation, maybe averages about 26 inches of rain a year. So not super dry, but drier than like where my winery is. The one of the most unique things about this site, also with the old sandstone, is that the majority of these vines are unrooted, and these are actually Talus Creek clones that were planted in nursery block, and then cuttings were taken from that to plant the commercial blocks. When we started working with Parr Vineyards 15 years ago, the Mourvèdre came from grafted vines that were planted like 10 by 5 or 10 by 6, a little bit wider spacing. That was kind of what everybody was planning on originally. And as Rob Parr developed this vineyard, he tightened the spacing up, and this wine comes from vines that are planted 7 by 4. So a lot denser planting, much more uniform from vine to vine. And really exciting block. This is to work with. This is actually the first vintage that we've bottled of it, and it's 100% Mourvèdre just from that block. With respect to oak treatment, there's none. The wine's aged in concrete, and this is our first year utilizing concrete for 100% of a cuvee. In the past, we'd utilized some concrete, but it was always part of a blend. We had never made a wine solely in concrete on its own. With younger Mourvèdre in Central Texas, we don't have as long of a growing season as you might find in like parts of California or Washington State or other areas, and I think that Mourvèdre makes a really beautiful wine, kind of regardless of the amount of days we get to hang the fruit. And I bring that up because with our weather in Texas, some years we're harvesting in early August because of how hot it's been and how early bud break was and how dry it was. And then some years we're harvesting in 40, 50 degree mornings at the end of September, the exact same site. So, you know, vintage to vintage, there's a lot of variability in the area. And what I really love about Mourvèdre is it seems to just show us what the vintage is like in the wine. And it's just a different spin. Whereas some other varieties in these sites seem to have like strong and weak years. We find Mourvèdre, you know, is a lot more dependable, consistent for us from a quality standpoint. And it's later budding, and this area in the hill country is prone to spring freezes. So viticulturally, you know, it's easier to farm, produces, I think, very like expressive wine from where it's from, and makes pretty elegant wine in some respects. And I know, you know, there's the many examples of Mourvèdre out there that are big, burly, chewy wines. And I think that's kind of like the beauty of this grape variety is how adaptable it is to where it's grown, and how expressive it is of where it's grown. So I really love working with it. Again, this is the first vintage that we bottled of this wine, but 2021 and 2022 are both in bottle. 23 is in bottle, and 24 is safe and sound in tank. And we're happy with all the wines. And there's a wild ride of vintage variation across those vintages, and you can still see like this wine has these underlying characteristics that, you know, make it through every year, regardless of kind of the roller coaster vintage that we may be riding. So we really like working with it. I really love this variety.
So two questions for you. One, price point.
This wine is $50.
Okay. And the second is the use of 100% concrete. Is that something that's been an evolution? Like you've kind of leaned more into it, or you have just always done mainly concrete?
No. When we started, everything was 225-liter barrels that were pretty standard in the industry out here in Texas, and we weren't considering concrete right out of the gate. But what we've always found is that a lot of the wines don't need a lot of like our Mourvèdre wine doesn't necessarily need a lot of oxygen, especially from this vineyard. I don't know if it's just because the old, like really old sandstone is kind of naturally low in organic matter, but produces like a more elegant, less tannic wine, like kind of in nature. And so we found barrels really push the wine around a lot, and I really like the restraint you get from concrete, where, you know, the wine it still breathes and ages and develops, but it's slow and it's subtle, and the impact from the cooperage, you know, concrete versus oak seems way less. So for us, it's just I think in Texas, while we're still trying to understand the terroir we have and the differences from vineyards to vineyard and area to area, we like to make wines that show us what the guts are of that place. And, you know, there may be a day when these vines are older, that a small portion of it is Asian oak or something along those lines. But from that place, we felt like concrete was the most suitable to get us that.
Fantastic. Well, it's a beautiful wine. And I can definitely get the elegance in it. Not as many rough edges as oftentimes Mourvèdre can have, for sure. So very well done.
Thanks.
You are welcome. Well, we Bill has joined us, so we'll go backwards and go back to Bill. So Bill Easton from Domaine de la Terre Rouge, welcome. Thank you for being here. And if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and introduce the wine that we're trying here. You are muted, my friend.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, gotcha.
Got me? Okay. I said technology's great when it works.
Yeah.
So fortunately, winemaking, we don't have a lot of technology. So we do everything by hand in the field, in the cellar. But I'm Bill Easton. I'm the owner and winemaker at Terre Rouge and Easton Wines. And I'm located about 50 miles southeast of Sacramento in the volcanic and granitic Sierra Nevada. And we work with very high elevation vineyard sites that are quite cool, that really, I think, do a good job of mimicking the Northern Rhone. Hence my interest originally in Roussanne as a white variety to work with in our region. We also work with Marsanne and Viognier, and more recently Rolle or Vermentino. And then we make some other white wines under our Easton label that are more traditional California white varietals like Sauvignon Blanc. But today I'm here to talk about Roussanne. And I've been making Roussanne since, I believe the first vintage was 1991. I have my own unique clone from the Rhone Valley that I was able to obtain through back channels. And it's from one of the great sites in Hermitage. And it really does quite well in our region. As you California winemakers know, our region quite often is deficit of water for, like this year, 6 months. So it's a very dry climate, very arid in the summer. And that's perfect for Roussanne. Because the reason Roussanne wasn't as favored a grape in the Northern Rhone, particularly more recently, and there was a shift from Roussanne to Marsanne, was because of the problems growing it. If you can get the fruit to the winery in clean condition, it makes a far superior wine to Marsanne. The problem in France is that it rains usually 12 months of the year, and it's very susceptible to rot. So we found that out the hard way in the 2011 vintage. And the problems we had with disease actually carried over for 2 or 3 years on the wood of the vine. So, and even with treatments. So it's just a difficult grape to grow. The other thing that people don't like about the way Roussanne grows is that it's an uneven ripener. So one side of the vine may still be green, and the other side of the vine may have blushed up and start to get the really nice flavors that you're looking for, the kind of beeswax flavors that you want before you pick it. So we've gotten around that problem by doing multiple passes through the vineyard, but also some of the green fruit is generally higher in acidity, so that kind of balances out the riper fruit. So overall, it works out quite well. The other great thing about Roussanne is the way it ages. I think it's the longest lived white variety from the Rhone Valley. And I'm sure the people at Beaucastel would agree with that, or Michel Chapoutier, who makes splendid wines from Roussanne, maybe the best in the Northern Rhone. We like to release our Roussanne at a later date. So the wine I have today in the glass is our current release. We started selling it this spring, and it's a 2015 vintage. So the secondary characteristics, which are the attractive part and the complex part of Roussanne, really don't develop until the wine has some time in the bottle. So you have to be patient with it to really get the best expression. But the exciting thing is, this is a young wine at 2015. This wine will probably still be fantastic in another decade. So our production techniques are pretty simplistic. We basically pick the fruit, we whole cluster press to tank. I want to ferment the wine at a cooler temperature through the first half of the fermentation because I want to keep all that freshness and fruit. So we generally ferment to about 10 to 12 bricks in stainless at 60 degrees. And then we transfer it to an old set of neutral French oak barrels, Burgundy barrels that are 20 years old. And the wine finishes fermenting in barrel, ages on lees, is never racked until we bottle it sometime the following year, depending on how the harvest goes, how the wine's developing. Sometimes we'll bottle it as early as the following June. Some years we'll keep it until before the next harvest. I have friends who make Roussanne, and they'll actually keep it in barrel over another winter. So 2 winters in barrel before they bottle it. So it just makes a very complex, rich, interesting wine. This particular vineyard is at 2,500 feet.
That's a fantastic wine. I mean, I have grown to love Roussanne as well. It's one of the most misunderstood varieties. I know when I take it out, oftentimes I always pour it at room temperature. I'm having yours at room temperature, and people oftentimes will say, "Well, you're not supposed to have white wines at room temperature." And I try to explain to them the richness, the fact that Roussanne is all about texture. It's not a high acid wine, and it shows best to me at cellar to room temperature.
The bottle I opened was right out of the cellar at like 58, 60 degrees, and I would call it perfect right now. Yeah, I agree with you totally. And it matches great with like grilled salmon. It would be great with some lighter meat dishes, some chicken dishes, some pork dishes. We serve it a lot. My wife likes to cook a lot of kind of North African inspired foods with dried fruits, dried apricots, and different things in sauces, and it's fantastic. A little spice, a little harissa, it can stand up to that. So it has the mouthfeel and the richness of a very high-end white Burgundy, you know, one that has some concentration and some richness. But at the same time, you know, it's not a low-acid grape. It's got great lift. Marsanne, on the other hand, is a low-acid grape. And we do make Marsanne, but we blend it with Roussanne and Viognier. So, and for us, in our region, Viognier and Roussanne are higher acid grapes.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, Roussanne, I guess it would be marginally higher acid than Marsanne, but definitely not as high acid as most other Rhone white varieties.
No, right, like Claret or something like that. Right, you're right. Yeah.
There is a winery down here, Stoltman, down here in Santa Barbara County, that's known for their Roussanne, and they literally go through the vineyard and turn every cluster midway through to make sure that they don't get that unevenness. I mean, the unevenness is something I always show at every vintage. I take pictures of it because it's wonderful to talk about. It's so much more fun for people to visually see how different the bake side is versus the non side, how green that other side is. And it's a really challenging variety to sample and get an accurate number on. But you're absolutely right. That green adds to acid, the other side adds to richness, and the two are really necessary for this variety. And Bill, what's the price on this?
This is $32.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Bill. By the way, Bill is a Lifetime Achievement Award winner with the Rhone Rangers. He was, if anyone is considered kind of one of the original Rhone Rangers, Bill would certainly be that. And so thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Larry.
You're welcome. Well, up next is Rachel Stinson Vrooman from Stinson Stinson Winery in Virginia. So welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. So are we the only winery on the East Coast tonight?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So Stinson is in the Monticello AVA of Virginia, of course, originally made famous by Thomas Jefferson, who failed pretty spectacularly at growing vinifera here. But that was kind of the genesis for wine in Virginia. And we are just to the east of the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is part of the Appalachian mountain range. So we've got some really nice, it's called Braddock soil, kind of a crystalline loam, very mineral rich from the decomposition of the mountains. Our big struggle is to control the vigor of the vines because the soil is so rich. It's like that, we call it that red Virginia clay. You can see it when you're walking and it goes all the way down. There's very little differentiation between topsoil and other layers. So we do a lot of canopy management. Our rootstock choices are going to cut down on vigor. And needless to say, we are an unusual region to be growing Rhone varietals. We also don't have a terribly long season because we do get spring frosts. Our latest one in my memory was May, and that was a hard frost. And then we are typically picked by mid-October because then we start getting offshoots from hurricanes. Even if they don't necessarily hit us, we're still getting some of the residual rain. So that's a relatively short season I think, for a Rhone varietal. And then coupled with hot summers, so the acid retention is not amazing. You don't really see very many Rhones. We planted Mourvèdre because we love Bandol rosés. And that kind of led us to explore more Mourvèdres from other areas. And we just became obsessed with the grape. And we decided to plant that to make a rosé to see if we could do it. Originally, we started with buying fruit there was a few small growers in the state who were also obsessed with Mourvèdre. I don't think you would plant it in Virginia if you weren't obsessed with the grape. And I don't know, I've just found that I don't know if it's the same with other Rhone varietals because this is the only one we're growing, but Mourvèdre people are typically very intense and passionate about that specific varietal. We found a few like-minded growers. We originally made rosé with this grape, and it was really pretty and we loved it. But it was a wine that we were just throwing acid at in the winery. And that's not an ideal scenario for us. It's not terribly unusual in Virginia, but it's not where we want to be. And so we started using our Tannat for rosé. Tannat has much better acid retention, especially in a hot, humid climate. That just seemed like a more natural, low intervention rosé wine for us. So then what to do with the Mourvèdre block? We were making two rosés for a while, but again, we wanted to get away from the Mourvèdre rosé. And in 2020, that was when we had our May 9th frost, and it fried the entire vineyard except the Mourvèdre, because Mourvèdre is so late budding. So we had Mourvèdre, but it was all secondary clusters because the first clusters had gotten fried. So, we didn't really know what to do with it. So we picked it and made a sparkling wine with it, a Blanc de Mourvèdre. And it was a hit. People loved it. So that's mainly what we use it for now. And that's what I offered Larry for the tasting. Also, PS. But he said he wanted to try a red Mourvèdre from Virginia. So the red is, this is what we do in a good vintage. It's only happened twice, where we've called the block for a good vintage and made a red out of it. We do have to make that decision pretty early on, but we did it in 2021 and we did it in 2023. This is not a typical Mourvèdre. I personally have never tasted a red Mourvèdre like this. I was very surprised by the results. Having, a history of drinking Domaine Tempier Mourvèdres, this is not what I expected a red to taste like, but we really liked it, and we were drinking it in the summer while we were out grilling and decided, this is a really beautiful, easy drinking wine, and it still retains a lot of what we love about Mourvèdre in the rosé. And it's something unique, and if we're drinking it, then other people will drink it too. And so it's become kind of an oddball hit for us. We price it, our price point is $33 a bottle. I do think it has some aging potential, but not in the way that you would typically think of a Mourvèdre. But we want it to just be a fun, food-friendly wine.
And why do you say it doesn't remind you of any other Mourvèdre you've had? Curious.
It's just lighter bodied, and it's much fruitier than I thought a Mourvèdre could be in the red version. But I have to say, having worked with the grape as an early pick for sparkling wine, and as rosé, I have not tasted that grape and had something that I thought was underripe. And I really, really like that about it. So I think that there's a lot of room for different flavors within the varietal.
I agree. I think it's an incredibly versatile variety. What bricks are you picking at? What clone are you using? And what's your oak treatment, if you don't mind?
So our clone is, we're using like the Languedoc clones. I think we've got 234 and 244 mostly. And then we are picking, honestly, we're lucky if it gets to 20 in a good year. So
Gotcha.
we're chaptalizing, but we get the acid numbers that we want. We get the flavor development at lower bricks here. So yeah, we're going to add a few bricks in the winery, and that's about it. We do a lot of whole cluster with this wine, usually about 20%, as we ferment. And I think that helps play up the really juicy cherry flavors. And then we press and go into neutral barrel with it.
Okay. That's a really pretty wine, but I agree. I mean, it's definitely more on the lighter, fruitier side, but it definitely still shows that earthy quality that Mourvèdre to me is very distinctive.
Mhm. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're welcome. No, thank you very much for sharing it. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. So next up is Danielle Langlois from Lasseter Family Wines. Danielle, thank you very much for being here. Excited to share your wine and try your wine.
Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle, and I'm the winemaker for Lasseter Family Wines. We're located in Glen, California, which is about an hour and 15, an hour and a half north of San Francisco. And if you know where the town of Sonoma is, we're about 15 minutes north of the town of Sonoma. We make right now we're tasting the 2019 Chemin de Fer. Oh, sorry. It's got a little train on the front. And that is our kind of flagship Rhone blend that we make here at Lasseter. John and Nancy, who are the vintners, the founders, fell in love with the Rhone Valley, traveling in France on trains there. So hence the train nod. They were just obsessed with them, so they wanted to plant some here, and it's really fun for me to be able to play with them as a winemaker. So this particular year, the 2019, was just a dream vintage for us in California, especially over on the Sonoma side. I mean, it was, we got to hang the fruit for as long as we wanted. We really got flavor development, and we didn't have any rain or extreme heat to kind of force our hand at the pick dates. This particular blend is 81% Grenache, 10% Mourvèdre, and 9% Syrah. I like to keep normally this wine under 12% Syrah, because I just feel like if you go over that, you're going to outshow the Grenache and the Mourvèdre. And really, we want to showcase the Grenache in this blend. And Grenache can be very delicate, especially with an overpowering grape like Syrah. I have heard, though, that if you can hold on to one of these wines for more than 20 years, and there's a lot of Syrah in it, the Grenache will push back after about 10, but haven't quite gotten there yet. Taste the wine. We really love this as a holiday meal wine. It's super versatile because it can stand up to your more rich red meats, stews, braised beef, but it's also great with whiter meats like turkey or chicken. And then we actually have a recipe that Nancy and John love to pair with this wine, which is a chicken pot pie. And if anybody would like that recipe, feel free to email us at info@LF Winery, and I will go ahead and pass Nancy's favorite pot pie recipe on to you guys. So in the winery, for the winemaking side, for the Rhones, we use a Chateauneuf de Pop technique where we'll bring the wines in, depending on the vintage. We'll do anywhere from 30 to 50 to sometimes on a really small lot, 100% whole cluster. And we do, we'll probably have about 15 or 20 different lots that we bring in. We will put them either in stainless steel or cement for fermentation. And then we do extended fermentation, which means that the wine will be sugar dry, but it will still be on the grape skins for about 1 to 2 weeks. So total time on skins is around 30 days for us. And that's because in our environment, the Grenache is really very tannic. It's very, very tannic. So we hang it as long as we possibly can for those tannins to soften on the vine. But we also give it a little help to stay in the tank for a little bit longer and really let those tannins bond and fall out while it's still in the tank. So we will also mix lees while it's in this extended fermentation period, and that kind of gives it a nice fattier, bigger mouthfeel, which is really nice with the Grenache. Let's see. Oh, I also wanted to mention that we are we do organic farming practices here. So we everything that we bring into the winery is farmed organically, and then we also have kind of what I call a biodynamic light tradition where we
I'm online actually.
where we will plant insectuaries around the vineyard to attract beneficial insects. We have dual irrigation systems where we only can irrigate the very plants that actually need it, and we're not overwatering everything. We also have started to implement sheep in the spring to kind of chew the grasses and then reintroduce some of that great biology back into the vineyard. So we're doing a lot of really cool things in growing. And here at Lasseter, we really believe that the wine is made in the vineyard. So on perfect years like 2019, my job is basically done for me. And then I just get to do the fun part, which is blending. And to make these blends, we will actually taste every single vessel. So tomorrow I'm going to blend the 2023s, and we have 62 different barrels to taste. So that's going to be a long day, but we taste every single barrel and we decide, which wine will that particular barrel will most likely go into. We have 3 different wines: the Chemin de Fer, the Dentelle de Fer, and then our Inattendu, which is a Syrah based wine. So the Chemin de Fer, what I really love about it is it's kind of a bigger wine. It's kind of a California-based style Rhone blend. It's, got nice fruit on it, really great tannin and structure, but also the blends of the different wines give it a nice complexity. So kind of always a reoccurring theme is kind of like a chocolatey strawberry taste for me on the palate. Yeah, it's 2019. You can drink it now, but these wines could probably be cellared for 10 years if you have the patience and the space and want to. And then this wine retails for $65.
It is really beautiful, and the Grenache, it's lifted, but it doesn't take on that candied quality that can oftentimes happen. What clones are you working with Grenache?
Oh yeah, so normally what goes into this particular blend, we work with Tablas Creek clones as well. We have 4 different Tablas Creek clones, A, B, C, and D. We also have an Albin clone and an Old Hill clone, which we think is still Albin, but it's just from a winery down the road. So.
Well, it's really beautiful. So do you generally stick with about 80% Grenache, you said, on this blend every year, approximately?
So we try and showcase the Grenache in this, so it'll be anywhere from probably, around 65 to 80, 85%.
Okay. And the extended maceration, is that something that you've always done? Or is that something that's kind of trial and error?
So in 2018, we were fortunate enough to be hooked up with Philippe Combi, who, was a great enologist in France and in the United States. So he kind of gave us a French-style winemaking protocol that I've really loved working with and adjusting to, making wine here in California. It's really very hands-on. So whereas the Bordeaux's, you know, I'll taste the Bordeaux's every day, but they kind of have a formula. Whereas you know, the Rhones, like I stick my hands in those, I get my hands dirty, I smell the grapes, I taste the grapes, actually in the ferment to see where they are, because in extended fermentation, you are kind of opening yourself up to you know, spoilage, bacteria, and you have to be really very careful. So you have to be very, very on top of it. And it's just really fun to see, you know, the different variations of where the wine can be taken, you know, depending on whole cluster or if we ferment and cement. Then to make press decisions, we take the wine out of the tank every other day, and then we put it in the fridge to kind of help that tannin fall out, and we taste it in order to make a press decision. And we're looking for tannin development while in tank has peaks and valleys. And so we are hoping to press in that valley of tannin development where the tannins are really kind of fallen out of the wine. So it's just a really hands-on, fun way to make wine that I've really appreciated learning. So
Fantastic. Well, it also goes to show there's not only one way of doing things.
oh, so many ways to make the Rhones. Yeah.
You know, the Aussies tend to deal with that tannin issue by pressing early, right?
Yeah.
And pressing sweet, finishing in barrel. So it's just interesting to see, again, how everyone goes about this and why everyone does what they do.
Yeah. We also use our goal is 30% or under new oak for this wine, and normally that is demi-mude or puncheons for the new oak on here, just because Grenache is so delicate to oak. We really want to offer a little bit of structure, but not overwhelm it. Just kind of, you know, enhance its natural features, like putting on mascara or something.
I get it. No, it makes a great deal of sense. Yeah, no, oak and Grenache new oak and Grenache tend not to go too well together, except if you're in Spain doing a specific style, but that's a whole other story. So thank you. I appreciate all the information and beautiful wine.
Thank you.
Rachel, going backwards, there was a question for you about the seeds when you're picking at 20 bricks. Are the seeds really green or are the seeds starting to brown in the Mourvèdre?
Yeah, our goal is always, we do pick a lot on seeds in Virginia. That's a good indicator of phenolic ripeness for us. And typically my Mourvèdre seeds are always a little bit green. I've never had them turn brown, like all the way. So what I'm looking for more is the structure of the berry when you pop it, to see if the berry is starting to soften and pull apart from the seeds. And the seeds are not bright green, but more like a chalky, like greenish brown.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And then there was another question, I think, for Danielle about the blend, whether it was the Mourvèdre perhaps was a single clone, or did you use multiple clones of Mourvèdre?
We have 2 different Tablas Creek clones for the Mourvèdre as well. And then the Syrah is normally just 1 clone.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Perfect. And I will say with Mourvèdre, I rarely find that those seeds turn really brown, even when they're, at least from my perspective, even when they're really ripe. I also find one of the unique things about Mourvèdre seeds, they tend to float to the surface during fermentation more so than any other variety. So I guess if you really wanted to skim them off, it's pretty easy because they do the job for you. So I don't see that in other varieties. So I find it really fascinating.
What kind of bricks are you getting on yours?
Oh, I mean, it's not uncommon for us to get 24, 25. You know, people will pick much, much riper than that. I mean, I do a Mourvèdre rosé, which I'm shooting for about 20. And And then, but from my Mourvèdres, I'll pick anywhere between 22 and 25, depending upon what I'm trying to achieve. But in our area, Mourvèdre, if Mother Nature allows us to, what happens in Santa Barbara County is the leaves start to fall off before the fruit gets ripe, you know, at the end of October, early November. So the Mother Nature is telling you when you're going to pick.
Yeah, some vintages are like that here too.
All right. Well, thank you again. And we're off to our last speaker, Steve Martell with Kaleidos up in Paso. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks for your patience for hanging on the whole time and not being able to speak too much.
Yeah, no worries. It's great to hear everybody talk about their wines from all over and all the cool stuff. So did get to taste a couple of the Mourvèdres, and they're really interesting from the different areas. Anyways, I'm Steve Martell with Kaleidos Winery. We're in Paso Robles. Our estate is located in the Willow Creek district on the west side of Paso. There you go. And we are a small producer, been producing small amounts of wine, under 1,000 cases. And we just celebrated our 20th harvest this year for the Kaleidos brand. So pretty excited about that, and really excited about the new wines that we've been releasing lately. So we do grow a little bit of fruit here. I've got a small vineyard that has that's been planted in Grenache and a little bit of Syrah, a little bit of Mourvèdre. And then I source fruit from kind of all over Paso, tend towards getting fruit from the west side of Paso, and really kind of trying to seek out those good small, organic, sustainably farmed vineyards for the fruit that we get. And so the first, or the wine that I brought today, or put into this seminar today, is the 2021 Morpheus. This is always my Syrah-based blend. I do a couple blends. We mostly focus on Rhone varietals here in general. I do a Grenache-based blend, and that's called Osiris. And then this is my Syrah-based blend. The 2021 Morpheus is 53% Syrah, 23% Carignan, 20% Grenache, and 4% Petite Syrah. The Grenache comes from our estate vineyard here, and the remaining fruit comes from Whale Rock Vineyard, which is in the Templeton Gap district. As the crow flies, it's maybe 2 or 3 miles from our site here. We can actually see the vineyard from our backyard, but it is quite a different little microclimate there. The vineyard is farmed all organically and biodynamically for a number of years now, which I really like. And being in the Templeton Gap, it gets kind of that cooler afternoon breeze that we get in Paso on the west side. Kind of gets that first because it's a little bit lower in altitude, and it also, being lower in altitude, stays a little cooler in the morning. So it's got kind of a shorter hot period during the day when things get hot here in Paso. And so I think that really maintains good acidity in the wines that come out of that vineyard. The fermentation practices, I do all native fermentation for my reds. I like to let it try to do a cold soak for 3-ish days, and then try to let it warm up, and just kind of monitor it, all the fermentations throughout the early fermentation. A lot of times with native fermentations, you might get a little bit of off characters, maybe a little VA, maybe a little ethyl acetate. But in my experience, if you don't freak out and you allow that fermentation to warm up and get 85, even 90 degrees, all that blows off. And I think a lot of that early development that happens during that early stage adds a lot of complexity to the finished wine. We generally age the everything but the Grenache in standard 225 liter barrels. And the Grenache, I do like to age in punch-ins, the 500 liter barrels. As somebody else said, it can be delicate. I think it's a highly oxidizable variety as far as the ones that I'm working with. And I feel like the punch-ins kind of protect it a little more from oxygen. keep that fresh fruit character in there. And so the final blend here is 50% new French oak. And let's see what else. As far as food pairings and holiday meals, I think this is a great wine for a roast with some, I think with the Mourvèdre that's in the blend has a lot of earthy characteristics to it, and so something maybe has some mushrooms in it, a roast or a steak that has a mushroom sauce. I think this would go great with. Although I really enjoy it by itself, sitting in front of a fire on a cool night. It's just really, really, to me, a nice, rich, pleasant wine that, gets me through some cold nights out here. The price on this is currently $49. And we made just over 100, 113 cases of it. So like I said, we're pretty small production here. Yeah, that's about all I've got for that.
Steve, it's drinking beautifully. I'm surprised that the Syrah component is not more powerful. I would think this would come across as bigger, but perhaps that Carignan is lightening it up. I don't know if that was its intent or not.
Actually, I think the Carignan may be just as big and dark as the Syrah on this. It's a pretty big, dark, rich wine, the Carignan. I think part of it is it's got decent acidity for a big, fairly big Paso Syrah or Rhone variety, and then lightened up a little bit with that Grenache in there. And so decent acidity for Paso, and I think a nice, pretty firm tannic structure right now, but I think this wine could age for another 10 plus years and really evolve. And I think I enjoy it after opening up and letting it decant for a couple hours now. It kind of gives me an idea of, the aging potential. So I think this can age for at least 10 years and be a really nice wine.
Yeah, the aromatics are beautiful, and I'm not getting that full hit of 50% new oak at all.
Right.
Very well integrated.
Yeah, I think so. So the French oak that we use, I think, is fairly subtle but elegant. Adds some nice soft tannins to the wine. Not too overly toasty. Generally medium plus toasted heads. I think on the punch-in that the Grenache came out of was neutral for this.
Gotcha. And how much does the blend change year to year?
It changes. The only constant is that it's Syrah forward, and so the blend can change quite a bit. Generally, the Syrah portion is anywhere from 49 to like 70%. And the other varieties that go into it kind of depend on what I have that year. When I'm sitting down to look at the blends, I kind of have an idea of what I want to put in it, and sometimes it can be different things. So this one I added Carignan when I normally would add Mourvèdre. I didn't have a lot of Mourvèdre for this vintage, and so I originally started working with Carignan because I couldn't find any good Mourvèdre fruit available. And so that was back in 2016, and Whale Rock Vineyard, owned by the Easton family, who owns Castora Winery, were very nice enough to give me a little bit of Carignan in 2016. The wine turned out amazing, I thought. I bought it to blend, and I ended up bottling all of it as 100% Carignan because I thought it was so good. This vintage 2021, I was able to save half of it for the blend and half of it went into a straight Carignan, but I only made 30 cases of that. So
gotcha. Yeah, that's another fun variety to work with for sure.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I wish I could work with it more, but it's not always available. Last year it frosted down there at the vineyard's pretty low, in a low spot, and we had some early frosts or frosts in October, and it was still at, you know, maybe 22 bricks or something, and green seeds, and so I didn't want to pick that, so missed out last year.
So, question for you, Steve: what does the Carignan contribute to the blend?
I think it adds a really good earthy component. To me, it's not necessarily mushroomy, but it's kind of like a fresh forest soil type of you know, decomposing leaves or fresh compost type of thing. Also adds some good color. Like I said, it's a pretty dark wine, and great tannin, kind of this chalky earthy tannin that really kind of complements, I think, the tannin in the Syrah.
Gotcha. Well, I think we're pretty much out of time here. Any of the panelists have any comments about any of the other wines that they tried?
I was really impressed with the Stinson, being from Virginia and getting picked so low bricks.
Yeah, thank
Surprised
you.
you get that big concentration and you know, richness. I really like that. And then you know, I really did love the Mourvèdre from the Lewis wines. That was kind of cool to see some stuff from Texas, and kind of bright fruity wine. I really enjoyed both of those. And I didn't get to try the other two wines, so I'm sorry I can't comment on how good they are. So
I'd like to reiterate what Steve said about the Mourvèdre from Virginia. When I was tasting it, I was like, oh, nice red fruit and earthy characteristics. It seemed just like Mourvèdre to me. And I would have never guessed the wine was chaptalized. And yeah, I don't think y'all should be so hard on it. The wine came out nice.
Well, that's our good vintage. But thank you. Yeah, we did worry about the seeds originally, but you know, we don't stress about it too much now. It doesn't seem to affect the wine.
Yeah, I think y'all managed the extraction really well. Like, there was no part of that wine that screamed like green or bitter to me. And when you said 20 bricks, I was like, really?
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thank you all again. I really appreciate you all being here. So just a little information for those people that are watching. The Rhone Rangers, the next main event we're doing is a Rhone Ranger Experience, which will be in Paso. It normally is President's Day weekend, but we've actually moved it until March. So it's March 22nd. It's on a Saturday, not a Sunday, and tickets are currently available. We're also going to be in Hill Country in Texas for the first time in April. So Doug will be featured first and foremost there, along with a couple of other wineries that are already members of the that Rhone Rangers, and we're getting more Texas wineries pretty much every week now, and we're really excited. It's the first time we're going there, and then we'll have more events throughout the rest of the year, and we'll have more Zooms as well. So thank you all again. I really do appreciate it, and have a great night.